For the rest of the month of August here on the Mind Money Balance podcast, you are going to hear me interview real-life therapists about their money stories, about niching down, about fee setting, and more. All of these therapists are in private practice, and I think it's so important for us to talk about it. And if you're wondering, if you are a longtime subscriber, thank you. If you're wondering why I am talking about therapists and money this month, so I'll tell you a little bit about why. So you know that I have been going through undoing all of this money shame around marketing and niching and having a client avatar and all of this nonsense, right? So a part of undoing that shame is stepping into my wisest and highest self and listening to my intuition. And right now, I feel like I need to help other private practice therapists who are struggling with their relationship with money, who are banging their head against the wall when it comes to charging for their services or setting a fee. And so that's why I'm dedicating the rest of this month, the month of August, to talking to other therapists. So in the old marketing businessy stuff that I had soaked up, the message that I had been taught was that when you have a podcast, when you have a YouTube channel, you should really only be positioning yourself as an expert, and that if you have anybody on, they should really be people who can provide you testimonials. And I'm like, that didn't feel right then, but again, I was not trusting myself. So now I'm stepping into trusting myself, and there is more than enough to go around. There are more than enough people in the world who need therapists. There are more than enough people who can teach therapists how to undo their money stories, and having other people on who might have similar niches or things that dovetail mine, it doesn't take away from my ability to be abundant and have success. So that was like the external kind of mind garbage I had to go through. But then I had to go through my own internal mind garbage of pivoting makes me flaky. And I started replacing that pivoting with expanding. And I told you a friend of mine gave me that little nugget, which was super helpful. So instead of pivoting makes me flaky, I'm saying I expand into the spaces where I'm most needed with ease. And right now, I feel like I am being called to help private practice therapists to cultivate healthy, profitable, sustainable businesses from the inside out, not by soaking up all this marketing garbage, but by soaking up what feels best for them and having that shine through. And then, of course, layering in some real practicalities of how to set a fee, how to create profit, how to make sure that you're not burning yourself out. So I'm really thrilled for the rest of this month, and I'm excited to introduce you to my first guest. Her name is Rachel Moore. She's out in sunny California, and she is an EMDR and psychotherapist for San Diego creatives. So she helps people who are writers, artists, and musicians work through their different barriers. So make sure you stay tuned for this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun, and thank you for staying with me as I expand into new spaces. All right, let's go. Welcome to Mind Money Balance. I'm Lindsay, a popcorn lover, woman of color, and financial therapist and coach. This is the No Guilt, No Shame podcast to help you stand in your financial power. Let's go. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of the Mind Money Balance podcast. As you know, I'm talking to therapists about their money stories because so many of us have been told things about money that might make it hard for us to also be business people. So today I have Rachel Moore here. I'm so excited. So Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? Where do you practice? What's your niche? Fill us in.
Sure. I'm super happy to be here too. I think this is a great topic to talk about. I'm not even sure what my thoughts are going to be about it, so I'm excited to see what we come up with.
See where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Rachel Moore, and I'm a marriage and family therapist in San Diego, California. I recently am just an online practice since the pandemic started, so I gave up my office and I'm here. I do EMDR therapy, which I love, and not only do I not know what I would do without it in general, especially doing this online therapy, especially doing it during the quarantine times, like it's been really, really great. And my niche is that I work with creative people, so artists, writers, musicians. That's my background as well. Before becoming a therapist, my bachelor's degree was in creative writing, and I was a newspaper copy editor for 14 years, and then switched over. So that's, yeah, generally what I'm about.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. I have so many questions about the logistics of how you're doing EMDR remotely, but I will keep us on track and talk about money. So one question that I've been asking therapists is, being a therapist and being in private practice, we have to hold space for two things: being a therapist and being a business owner. So I would love to learn from you what unhelpful money stories you had to overcome to create a sustainable private practice, whether that meant going back in time to childhood or whether that meant getting into asking your clients to pay you. So tell me a little bit about those money stories and what you did to get where you are today.
You know, it's really interesting because I need to acknowledge the fact that I am very privileged in that when I was going to school and for the years of my internship in California, I think New York as well, we have to get 3,000 hours of internship, most of it unpaid out here. So during that time, my husband was able to take care of us financially. We very much were strategic about that, you know, talked about like how many years that would take, et cetera, et cetera. I remember when I left my newspaper job, and there were a couple of weeks before I started my master's program. That feeling of not making money was interesting and almost like overwhelming, even though, again, we had this understanding. I felt very grateful. I mean, super grateful to my husband. Without his support, I would not be able to build the practice that I have. That's the reality of it. And again, that's how we planned it. But feelings of inadequacy and guilt and what is it to be a person in this society who's not quote unquote working, meaning not making money, that was tough.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that I, wrestled with a lot of feelings of guilt. And yeah, like I remember there was this one time, my very first internship at a private practice was not going well for various reasons. It just wasn't a good fit. I didn't really know that though, because it was my very first time and, I was so green. And I remember talking to a friend and saying like, I don't know if I should quit this, internship, and then I wouldn't have anything backing up, but it's just not working and it's taking up all my energy and time for something that's not working. And I remember her comment was something like to the effect of like, oh, well, gosh, I wish I had that choice, but I have to keep my job because I have to keep getting paid or something like that. And it struck me. And my response was, well, you know what? I wonder if in that case it would be an easier decision.
This was a thought you'd had.
Yeah, I said that out loud. I said,
you did? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a good friend I've known for a long time.
Love it. Love friends who can talk about money.
Yeah. And I said, and I really believe that, it's like if this were something that, because I like even towards the end of my internship and my husband had lost his job. And I told him, I'm like, I will go get a quote unquote job if we need to. I will do whatever we need to do to survive. Like it's, oh yeah, I might, have to delay or give up my dream of private practice. I need to do whatever we need to do to survive. So yeah, I told my friend, I said, you know what? I think that in a way it would make it easier if there was money dependent on this decision, because when there isn't, it becomes really confusing. And again, these are all kinds of conundrums and situations that I had that really was almost impossible to talk to anybody about, to be honest, at the time, because I would get responses like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so curious how you are in the niche that you're in, that is, therapists are inundated with messages that money is bad or they didn't choose this field because money is important to them. But I think maybe the only group of people who have it worse than us in terms of money stories is artists and creatives who are told things like you're a sellout if you make money, or there's, this image of the starving artist. So I'm so curious. I imagine money has to come up in your work. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But like, just from a business perspective, how do you hold space for creatives who have a ton of money stories and charging them to work with you? Like walk me through that a little bit.
I would say, as I was hearing you, talk about this issue, of artists and money, what kept coming up for me was in my experience with artists, it's more about this idea of success.
Mm.
Success can mean money and it can mean something else, because yes, a lot of therapists, a lot of artists, money is not our main motivator to do what we do. I mean, if it was, we'd probably be doing something else, I mean, yeah, whatever. That just is true. It was true for me as a newspaper editor too. It's like, I did it because I loved it. So working with them on this idea of success. I have for many years done groups based on the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Good, cool. And she has, I'm thinking about this list she has of all these beliefs we have about artists, and then the opposite, right? It's almost like a CBT type intervention, right? It's like, okay, artists have to be poor. Artists have to be quote unquote crazy. Artists have to be, to not think of anybody else but themselves. And then to counter those beliefs with artists can be abundant. Artists can be sane. Artists can be generous, right? And so I think that in my work with artists, it's not so much about money in particular. It's interesting to actually talking about this because I'm like, oh, we hardly ever talk about money, actually. Maybe we should. I don't know. It does kind of come more around these ideas of, if I'm going to say that I'm an artist and I'm going to have the audacity to say that, what does that even mean? And how are people going to view me? And how right, like you're saying, like how I should treat money and success and fame, and whether I should feel guilty about quote unquote selling out. Yeah, that's kind of usually how it comes up.
Okay, yeah. So another thing that kind of intersects or dovetails really with money and therapists is this idea of niching down. So many of us, when we go into private practice, we're like, if I niche down, I won't be able to have a full caseload, or I won't be able to make ends meet, or I'll be turning somebody away who could really use my help. So talk us through how you got to your current niche and how you overcame any of those types of worries as you niched down.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was so funny because after I graduated, I took like a year off from even trying to get an internship and get hours because it felt so daunting. Again, those 3,000 hours, I was like, what am I doing? I got to do that. And I tried to do, or I did, creativity coaching. I did more Artist Way groups. I worked with some individuals. And finally one day, I realized that I wanted and needed to be a therapist because the built-in boundaries around being a therapist were very useful to me. Just as a person. I liked that. I liked that structure. And then one day it just occurred to me, like, gosh, because I had separated it so much. I'm like, well, the coaching people I'm working with, I know them personally, so I can't see them as a therapist. But so those are two totally separate things. And then one day I was like, no, wait a minute. Actually, I had a friend who's a marketing expert tell me, she's like, no, you can work with the people that they know. You don't have to, maybe you can't work with the people that you've been working with directly with the Artist Way or various things, but you can work with, but they know people you can work with. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. Who do I work with? I work with people who are like me. I work with people like, I would love to go to a therapist. And when I said something to the effect of like, what it feels like to be on stage, like what it feels like to be a singer, what it feels like to write something, that they totally get it intuitively. We don't have to waste time with me trying to explain or just feeling not heard and not connecting in that way. I would love to see a therapist who just got that. And like, that would be the coolest thing ever. And that's what I want to be in my work. So going back to that very first private practice, and part of the reason why it wasn't a good fit is that I went to my supervisor and I was working on my website and I was like, hey, I got this whole stable of people, of artists who know me. Like, I have a reputation in this world, not big, but those are my people. And that's a thing that I have. And her response was, no, you're an intern. You have to be general. And I just knew that didn't make any sense. I wasn't totally confident yet in this is going to be my niche and this is going to work. It just didn't make sense to throw all of that work I'd done away. Years I'd worked with artists, right, before I was a therapist. So why would I do that? And why? And I'm not general. None of us are.
Yeah, I love what you just said. I'm not general. None of us are. Yes.
Nope.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
I was thinking about this the other day. I feel so confused in a way when I see therapists on Facebook or whatever talk about their niche and say that they work with anxiety and depression. And to be honest with you, I'm like, No, that's just being a therapist.
It's so funny you say that because that was literally my niche when I started. I serve people with anxiety and depression. And then, of course, as soon as I hung my shingle on that, all of a sudden I was like, wait, that's like everyone. That is not, yeah, I specialized in CBT. Yes, I specialized in, one area. But wow, yeah, I love that you just said that. It's so funny because that's not a niche. Or, the people who are like, yeah, I specialize in families. I'm like, what does that mean? Well, I work with kids, adolescents, whole families, couples, I'm like, wait, that's also not a niche. So it sounds like you actually didn't have any worries about niching down. It was almost like you got messaging from other people that you weren't allowed to do that. So how did you combat that? Like your supervisor, for example?
I left.
Okay, that's one way to do it.
I'll be honest. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was like, this will not. I just knew. I mean, it's hard to explain that. It's just like, again, it just didn't make any sense. I knew what I had to offer, and frankly, even that time where I was doing coaching, like it wasn't. If we're talking about money, like it wasn't super lucrative or anything, and yet I knew I could do it, and I knew that there were people looking for something like that. So I had that experience behind me. And I knew what I wanted. And I knew that there were people like me out there in the world. And it was almost impossible to explain. I could never prove to somebody this was true. I mean, even my husband, bless him, who again, super grateful for because I wouldn't be here without him. When I first said that I was going to, because I was just doing Artist Way stuff like as a hobby or whatever, just with friends or whatever for a while. And then I was like, I'm going to make this into a little business. When I first said that, his first response was, oh, wow, who would pay for that? And you know what?
Yeah.
I know. Yep. It was from a place of really not knowing on his part. He wasn't being rude. He was just, I love him because he just says what he thinks. And that's what he was thinking. And I just had to trust, again, there were people out there like me, and I knew what I wanted. I thought I knew what they wanted. I did know what they wanted because now people will contact me. And I love this so much. And I would want this for every therapist, right? People see, I'm very clear in my messaging about who I work with. And then there's that message that I really like too, that when you niche, you will get your niche and everybody else. It's true in my experience. It's true. And I'm also very clear in my messaging and my marketing and on working with creative people. People will contact me, say, hi, I'm a writer. I see you work with writers. I want to work with you. End of story. I will pay your full fee. Done. Now,
okay.
Is that everybody? No. Yeah, but when it is, it's great. It's great because it's such a win-win.
Right, exactly. Because when I think about, so much of our marketing today is online, whether it's through blogs and search engine optimization, picking up keywords, or whether it's from word of mouth, right? Our clients saying, oh my gosh, I got a great therapist. You have to check them out. Our marketing has to be super specific. And exactly for that reason that you're talking about. If somebody is scrolling for therapists in San Diego, they're going to get a ton of responses. But if they say therapists for creatives or therapists for writers or mental health help for creatives, they're going to find you and they're going to say, I don't care. So let's talk about something you just said. They'll pay me my full fee. As comfortable as you are, tell me a little bit about whether or not you take insurance. You don't have to share your fee, but how you landed on your fee. And let's talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't accept insurance. If people have a PPO insurance plan, I'll give them super bills so they can bill their insurance.
Yep.
I do have a pretty wide sliding scale range. So here's the way that I work it. I have a particular average fee in mind that I want to hit. And, I'm near there. It's pretty close, within a few bucks. That's what I aim for. So on the sliding scale, somebody may be paying full fee, somebody may be paying less than full fee. It averages out to this particular number that I'm aiming for. And that's what works for me.
Cool. How do you determine who you'll slide for?
I tried it. So I've thought about this a lot, done trainings on this a lot. I like the idea of saying, for example, in the first conversation on the phone, first consultation, and I always want to, almost always talk with people before I see them. Because again, I think that good fit is so important. And I want to throw in here too, that having a good also list of referrals is extremely important as well. So I will say, this is my fee. Will that work for you? Or how would that work for you? And they either say like, yeah, that's great. Or they're like, well, and to be honest with you, I don't want therapy to be a burden. That's one thing I did. One thing I did get out of my first internship that was helpful was that in her messaging, she would say, therapy shouldn't be a financial burden to you. I agree with that. Like if it's a financial burden, it's probably not going to help. I mean, really, it should be kind of that sweet spot of like, I think of just enough investment that it feels like you're doing something, you got some feet on the ground, but not enough that it's just negating any benefits you might be having. So anyway, all that to say, if they say something like, well, I don't know, that might work for a few sessions, like then we'll have a conversation about it, or if they'll just say, no, that wouldn't work at all. Or if they say, that won't work at all, I want to use my insurance, or here's what my insurance copay is. In that case, I'll probably refer them out. By the way, if anybody here is in the entire state of California now and works with creative people, please contact me if you have room. I'm like, how am I one of the only people doing this? I mean, in a way, it's great because, my practice is full. In a way, it's like, it's more important to me, though, that people get help. And I would love to have more people like me to refer to, to refer them to.
Yeah.
So just to throw that out there too.
Okay. So you said a lot of great stuff about kind of creating an average. What I also loved about when you first bring up the money with your potential clients, you do what a lot of us therapists are trained to do. You don't assume that they can or cannot afford something. You say, this is the price. Does that work? Right? So many of us therapists, we make these assumptions when we're starting out in private practice that nobody can afford us, or depending on their age or what their occupation is or what neighborhood they're in, we make these assumptions about what they can and cannot afford. And it's so interesting that we do that. And we're like, well, here's our fee, but I can slide down to XYZ. It's also a little bit insulting when we throw those things onto potential clients. So I love that you open with that. And then the other thing that you are also doing with your niche is saying, the fear again with newer therapists or for therapists who are terrified to niche down is that, oh my gosh, I'll run out of people to see. And it's like, no, actually you won't. When you specialize, you become an expert in that one area. If I'm looking for a therapist for creatives in San Diego, then I know exactly who I'm going to call. And also this idea of abundance, right? Of there's more than enough to go around. There's more than enough therapists. There's more than enough clients who need therapists in our world, right? And most therapists I feel like I talk to, they're full and they have a wait list. So that also tells me like, it's okay. You can totally niche down. It's really important. Did you ever have a hard time saying like, I'm a fee for service provider, or this is my fee? Were there ever moments where those old money stories came up for you?
Yeah, actually just recently, and this is kind of, let's just say that there's a person, who is in another industry who I said my fee, and they said, well, this is what I charge. And it was a lot lower. And I just didn't say anything. I was like, okay. Now, did that stick with me? Yes. It stuck with me. I was just thinking about it even like last night when I was like, one of those like having trouble sleeping thoughts that comes up, right? And I'm like, what was that?
Right.
What was going on there? I'm not sure what was going on there. It did make me think. I did have the thoughts in my head, like some of the automatic negative thoughts, not really strong, but there. Of, oh, what do I do that's so different and special from this other industry that I charge this much?
Yeah.
Of course, the rational thoughts are like, well, this is the industry standard. There's nothing, I'm not like, it's $1,000 a session. Like, I'm not like, I'm not that. It's not out of the realm. Well, another thought comes up too. I was going to say, it's clearly something going on with that person. But you know what the other thought is, Lindsay? Maybe nothing was happening in that exchange.
Right. Exactly. It could have really just been an observation. You charge this, I charge this. Right? It is so amazing how money and fees and charging for our services brings up this stuff. So it's funny because I'd asked you about like, what would have been some things when you were starting out, but you responded with something that is a constant reminder that I tell my clients that I'm working with, which is we interact with money all the time. I went to a money mindset workshop and now I'm done. It iterates, it changes. We have to get good at thinking about and talking about money and being okay with it evolving in our life too. Love it. So before I ask the final question, which is super short, what advice would you give to somebody who's not brand new to private practice? Maybe they've been in private practice for 3 years, 5 years, and they're considering raising their rates or niching down, but they have all this stuff going on. What kind of wisdom would you impart to them just as a colleague, not even as like a therapist? What kind of advice would you give them?
The words that popped in my head were go with what you know. Let's try to figure out what that means. Like
spoken as a writer, right?
Right, yeah, like, thank you, intuition. Now, would you please explain? I'm just referring, what it felt like, I was just referring back to my story and my experience of being the therapist that I would want to go see.
Yeah.
Because I think that when we do that, everything can line up really nicely, right? Like, I know that there's also the question of like, well, what if I'm like, I don't know, really specific, I don't know, person who likes to knit and has a hard time with, I don't know, the Cops TV show and, I mean, I'm just throwing things, right? Okay, if you're that specific, yeah, it's probably going to be an issue. But if you're generally like a person who maybe does have a hobby like knitting, I mean, what would be so wild about that, right? Like, I'm a therapist who loves to knit. Do you love to knit? Come see me. I mean, it sounds wild, but I would say like get wild with your thoughts about niching, right? Like get really expansive with who you might attract, so much beyond this idea of anxiety and depression or families, like we were saying, or, even like women. That's another general category I see. Well, yeah, guess what? Like 96% of therapy clients are women. Let's, niche down even a little farther, right? Or maybe men, like get that 4%, right? They're out there. And if they're not out there, explain to them why they should be going to therapy, right? So like I would say in whatever way you can, find a way to really expand your thinking, expand your view of what you have to offer as a person and what your experience has been as a human being. Because I think ultimately that's really what people are looking for, is another human being to interact with, not like this avatar of like therapist person. I mean, we have to do that to a certain degree, of course. We are professionals and we're also human beings. And I think that human being side is really where you're going to find the gold when it comes to figuring out what your niche is.
So beautifully said. There were so many nuggets in there. I'm just like furiously nodding along as you're speaking. So thank you for that. So my final question is hard for therapists because I'm asking them to pick one thing. So, okay. Rachel.
Not expansive. Yeah.
I know. Everyone's like, wait, can I use the word and? I'm like, God. So as best as you can, Rachel, what is your favorite thing about being in private practice?
Oh, being my own boss. Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah. Okay, great. I love it. So Rachel, for everybody listening along, where can they find you? Where's your website? Do you use social media? Fill us in on where people can find you.
Sure. My website is rachelmoorecounseling.com, and it's spelled probably exactly as you might imagine Rachel Moore is spelled. It's very standard.
Great.
And I'm on Instagram a little bit, Rachel Moore Counseling, on Facebook a little bit, Twitter, like not really at all because Twitter. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'll also throw in there that I haven't had time to do this, but sometimes I do help other therapists with marketing. That's like a little baby project that hasn't really gotten off the ground because, to be honest, I've been so busy being a therapist. But if you have questions or thoughts, I'm happy to always connect with other colleagues. And I think it's fun to talk about this stuff. So.
Yeah, it is. It is. We are more than one thing. We are multidimensional humans. And somehow it's like this myth that therapists can only be therapists. But it's like, we're humans. We have so many unique characteristics to us. And the more we can step into those, the better we can serve our clients. And then also help with our own financial wellness. So thank you so much. This was great. And hopefully everyone will follow you along and find your website. And again, if there's anyone in California who can take people on Rachel's wait list, let her know.
Please, let me know.
Have you requested access to my private Instagram community at Mind Money Community? Learn from and connect with others in similar situations as we talk about what we've done to keep our relationships alive and thriving. On Mondays, I share money tips. Thursdays, I go live answering your questions. And Fridays are reserved for fun. Hope to see you there at Mind Money Community. Neither the host or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, medical, or other professional information. If you want professional help, please seek it out.